Weeds' Nancy Botwin began the show as a very sympathetic figure, newly widowed and left to figure out how to keep her family afloat while struggling with her own grief. But over the course of the show's 8 seasons, a different, darker side of Nancy made itself more and more apparent. She remained entertaining to watch, but became harder and harder to side with. By leaning into her anti-hero nature, instead of pulling back and softening her edges, the show managed to create a portrait of a complex, messy woman, and the more sinister sides of her personality that cause her to harm everyone around her in her quest for more. So what does Nancy's story really reveal about the reality of diving into the darkness to chase a high you can never really catch? Let's take a deeper look.
I'm the suburban baroness of Bud, Nancy.
When we first meet Nancy, she's attempting to work her way out of a tight spot. Her husband, Judah, recently died of a heart attack, leaving her alone to raise their 2 sons and bear the burden of keeping the family financially afloat. Before Judah's passing, the family had just sunk a lot of their money into a home renovation, at the time assuming they'd just be able to pay it off over the years. But when breadwinner Judah died, Nancy had to quickly figure out how to shift from housewife to sole provider. To make ends meet, she turned to an under-the-table source of income, selling weed to her neighbors in her Los Angeles suburb.
I grow and sell marijuana. It's organic. It's therapeutic. It's of the earth. Like tomatoes.
While weed has become more normalized in recent years, in 2005 it was still rather transgressive, particularly in the affluent echelon of society that Nancy existed in. Her new job gave her something else to focus her thoughts on, something that could pull her out of her grief and her worries about her children. And it also allowed her to make the most of some of her best qualities, like her confidence and personable nature, as well as some parts of herself that had been slowly fading away, like her independence. But it also starts to bring out some of the darker sides of her nature as well, like her manipulative streak and desire to seek out thrills. She tells herself and others that everything she's doing is okay because at the end of the day, she's doing it for her family.
I'm not a dealer. I'm a mother who happens to distribute illegal products through a sham bakery set up by my ethically questionable CPA.
She contends that because she's not the greatest parent in the world, the best thing she can do for her sons is at least set them up for life financially. But it doesn't take too long before we begin to see how often she's willing to take the selfish path that hurts others, including her own children, for her own gain.
You need to stop hanging out with bad people. The man set a town on fire.
All the more reason not to piss him off.
Thankfully, things have changed, and now you don't have to stress about everything like Nancy. If you want to add some more chill to your days, you can just use this video's sponsor, Cycling Frog. They have so many awesome hemp-derived cannabinoid products, from seltzers to gummies to brownie bites and more. We've been loving their new sparkling THC raspberry lemonade, which packs an awesome 50 milligrams of THC and CBD. The high potency is perfect for experienced users, but is also great to enjoy even if you have a lower tolerance because you can just sip it over a few sittings. Either way, it'll help bring some tasty relaxation to your day. In addition to the 50 milligrams, they also have 5 milligram and 2 milligram seltzers, so there's a great option for you no matter what level of THC you're looking for. If you're ready to head into the end of the year with a much more chill vibe and support the take, make sure to check out Cycling Frog. They've even given us a special code just for our audience so that you can get a whole 20% off your entire order. So make sure to head over to cyclingfrog.com, grab your goodies, and use the code TheTakeHolidays at checkout to get your discount. That's TheTakeHolidays for 20% off your first purchase. This story might, on its face, sound a little familiar to you, and if so, you're not alone. Nancy's arc shares many similarities with that of Breaking Bad's Walter White. They're both normal, seemingly unassuming people who allow their desire for power and thrills to drive them and everyone in their orbit to destruction, while the entire time they tell themselves that they're really doing everything for noble reasons. In an article he wrote for Newsweek, Breaking Bad creator Vince Gilligan even noted that he almost gave up on pitching the show when it was pointed out how similar his idea was to Weeds, at least on paper. It was explained to me that Weeds was a Showtime show, new that season. In it, a suburban mom decides to throw her law-abiding life of propriety to the wind and make quick cash for her family by trying her hand at drug dealing. Hearing this, I could feel the blood drain from my face. But, as he noted, the shows were able to differentiate themselves because they approached their subject matter from very different directions. Weeds aiming for comedy, Breaking Bad aiming for drama. drama. Breaking Bad and Weeds turned out to be different enough, if not on paper, then in execution. It seems that, for a writer at least, marijuana and meth are the psychopharmaceutical equivalents of Greek comedy and tragedy masks. One leads its characters to laughter, the other to tears. And while Weeds does approach its story from a much more lighthearted angle, it does still work to unpack the destructive nature of how far Nancy is willing to go to feed her own narcissism and a need for excitement.
How am I supposed to put food on my table if you keep upping my debt?
Get a f***ing job.
Nancy initially takes some desperate measures to get herself and her family out of the sticky situation they find themselves in.
What am I doing?
You're doing what all of us are doing, baby. You're getting by.
But it soon becomes about much more than that to her. An adrenaline junkie her entire life, she comes to find that she loves the thrill of danger that comes with dealing. She tries to go kind of legit with her dealing by opening a bakery to sell out of, and at various points takes on safer, regular jobs to distance herself from the real danger.
Today, it was brought to my attention that the downside of this business is death. I'm not thinking about the bakery, I'm thinking about enrolling in dental hygiene school so my children aren't orphans.
But no matter how dire things get, she can't stop herself from not only returning to dealing, but also trying to climb the ladder within the cartel world.
I got what the world would call a normal, boring job. I wake up in the morning, take my brain out of my skull, and place it in a drawer.
Like with Walter, it isn't about the drugs themselves, but the power that being in control of them provides. She doesn't want the stability of a normal job. She wants the thrill of danger and the rush of power she gets when she's in that world.
You get your tooth back. I keep your tooth. I drill a tiny hole in it and wear it around my neck. I become your god.
In chasing this high, she's willing to hurt anyone else in her life if it gets her closer to her goal. She screws over pretty much everyone she comes into contact with without a second thought. Her combined buffers of privilege, being white, upper middle class, and attractive, combined with her viewing herself as the center of the world, mean she's able to both overlook much of the damage she causes and skate out of some very precarious situations. She's also willing to make huge decisions that impact everyone around her on a whim, because it's what she feels is best for her. Like when she decides to burn down the family home so that she can have her moment of closure. To be fair to Nancy, there was already a wildfire moving its way towards the house. But instead of using the chance she got to sneak back in to grab anything that might be important to her children, she instead lights it all on fire so that she can begin letting go and moving on. It's a function of her need to wrest a feeling of power and control over situations that feel like they're spiraling out of her grasp. The raging wildfire doesn't get to destroy her things because she already has. Nancy's rather selfish and reckless nature, unsurprisingly, causes a lot of strain in her relationships. She was always rather distant from her kids to some degree, but the further she dives into the cartel life, the more she's willing to put them and their futures at risk, even as she continues to tell herself that she's doing everything for them. There's clearly a simmering guilt within Nancy that Judah was the better parent, and now the kids are worse off for being left with her. But instead of trying to do the best she can for them, she can't stop herself from turning down the dangerous paths that are most thrilling to her.
The wrong parent died! And you know what? Tough shit!
Her romantic relationships are fraught, to say the least, as well. She has a running situationship with Andy, Judah's brother, throughout the show. While they do care for one another on some level, they create a toxic cycle of constantly pulling each other back into their worst habits.
You helped me when I was lost. Gave me a home, a family, and a purpose. I'll always be grateful to you. And I'll always, always love you, Prince, but I can't be near you.
But Nancy's biggest relationship isn't with any man or even herself, but with that hit of adrenaline that she's constantly pushing the envelope to feel. Over the show's run, Nancy's antics spun further and further out of control as she chased increasingly higher highs. But she also evolved to meet the new challenges she faced. But growth is never really linear. Because the boundaries of life Nancy was afforded by society were so wide, she seldom bumped up against real issues that her privilege couldn't pull her out of. This stunted her growth in many ways. Things that would often lead to one learning the error of their ways and deciding to make some life changes, like going to jail or getting shot in the head, don't have the same effect on Nancy. Even as the series neared its end, Nancy found herself with yet another legit job that she could just do well and live a normal, safe life. But she just couldn't stop herself from giving in to her desire to do the bad thing, to chase that adrenaline high one more time. But as always, she manages to make some smart moves too. She decides to go back into business selling MILF weed. And as we flash forward to the future in the final 2 episodes, we find that this was a very lucrative call. Weed was legalized in the intervening years, and the company did a huge business, leaving Nancy and everyone else involved rich. But even though she's finally secured that financial stability that she was initially hunting for, we also see how the path she burned to get there took its toll on her and everyone around her. Nancy finds herself wealthy but emotionally unfulfilled and very alone. She and Andy had finally hooked up on the very spot that her husband and his brother had died, no less, right before the time jump. And we come to find that they never spoke again until they meet in the finale. She got married to Rabbi David, who then died in a car crash. Shane, warped by his upbringing and overcome by his alcoholism, has become a dirty cop, who also feels very put out because he decided to side with the law over Nancy's now very successful business. Silas, on the other hand, was able to take control of his life and free himself from Nancy's grasp, both metaphorically and literally as he moved to the other side of the country with his wife. Everyone comes back together for the first time in years for Stevie's bar mitzvah, Nancy's youngest son, who she had with cartel kingpin and mayor of Tijuana, Esteban, who, after Esteban's murder, she raised to believe was David's biological child. At the bar mitzvah, Guillermo lets Stevie in on the truth about who his father is, upending his conception of his family and himself. In the end, much like Silas, he decides that he needs some space from Nancy if he's going to have a chance of figuring out his own life.
I don't feel so good. And I don't know who I am. And I want to go to boarding school.
While everyone is ostensibly going back for Stevie's bar mitzvah, they're also there to push Nancy to agree to sell the business for a huge profit. She's weary of giving up the empire she's built, but she also knows that it's the last thing that ties all of these people to her, and once it's gone, they will be too. In the end, she agrees to the sale, but it doesn't feel like old Nancy's drive to blow up her life or some kind of power play. She has grown enough to realize that one of the hardest things for her to do isn't some scary, exciting move, but instead making a choice that hurts her, but is good for the people she cares about. And most terrifyingly of all, finally stopping and really dealing with who she is and who she's become.
But you're gonna be fine. You're so strong. So, time for you to face yourself.
Nancy is a complicated character, and that's what makes her so interesting. It drives what makes her enthralling to watch, but also what makes you cringe about her or want to throw something at the screen. Her story shows how important it is to not get trapped in your negative patterns, and instead find ways to really grow and become a better person, instead of letting the worst parts of yourself drag you down forever.
No one to hold you back from becoming the person you always wanted to be.
Who is that?
Time for you to figure it out.
Like all of the best anti-heroes, Nancy shows us what not to do, while still allowing us the fun, and occasional pain, of watching what could happen if we did venture down that dark path. Thanks so much for watching, and to Cycling Frog for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to head over to cyclingfrog.com to check out all of their tasty options, and use the code TheTakeHolidays to get 20% off your entire order. You'll be helping support The Take and giving yourself the gift of some extra relaxation as we wind down the year. So make sure to head over to cyclingfrog.com, grab your goodies, and use the code TheTakeHolidays at checkout to get your discount. That's code TheTakeHolidays for 20% off your first purchase. That's The Take. Click here to watch the video we think you'll love, or here to check out a whole playlist of awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.